So like she said, I'm Chelsea Dowell. I'm an assistant professor of economics at Kentucky Wesleyan College. So I've been there, I just finished my first year there. So I'm happy to be closer to home. You see the photo, that's my nephew, so I get to spend more time with my family now. But to give you a little bit of background, my nephew's gonna help me with my presentation illustrations from here on out. But I started doing some research for my previous institution. And when I was at my previous institution, they hired me to create an economics minor program. They had a few classes, but they didn't have a major, they didn't have a minor. So when I started doing my research to build a good minor program that was going to be complementary to what they already had, the economics department was in the School of Business. So I wanted to make sure it complemented the business majors they already had. So I started looking at what businesses wanted out of their new graduates. And the three main things that kept popping up in all of my research was that globally businesses wanted to hire problem-solving leaders with ethical standards who could communicate professionally. And most of our economics majors are actually graduating and going straight into the business world anyway. Only about 30% of our economics majors are going on to the research track, where closer to something like 36% are indicating they're going straight into business. But what was most interesting to me when I started doing this research was that employers weren't just saying they wanted professional communicators. They were saying that we as undergraduate institutions were not producing professional communicators. So after developing my program learning outcomes and subsequent course list, I started researching assessment methods. And when I started doing my research for assessment methods, the one that kept popping up over and over again for oral communication was formal presentations. That was the go-to best practice for our economics programs. But our employers kept coming back and saying that our graduates were insufficient at oral communication. So somewhere in there, our best practice must not have been sufficient either. So formal presentations, very important, but many new graduates are going straight into business and oftentimes into jobs where they'd never actually have to formally present. So there's a disconnect between the employers and our programs. For the most part, we can separate oral communication into three main categories. So Crossling and Ward 2002 separated into collegial interactions, supervisor interactions, and outside staff interactions. So interactions among colleagues that can be similar to what you'd think of as student interactions in a classroom with their peers. And most collegial interaction, those colleague to colleague interactions, that's what they're really seeing most of in your day-to-day work in a traditional business setting. Our economic education research, we have plenty of resources out there that promote student-to-student discussions, student-to-student interactions. And if you want a full list of citations, I can make that available upon request. But some of those can include think, pair, shares, or collaborative learning assignments, debates, etc. We've all talked about them. But those student interactions are a great jumping off point, but again, have not quite made it the full leap to meeting our employer or the students' future employers' needs. So I developed a field experiment where I looked at three sections of my undergraduate micro and macro classes. On the day after ad drop was over for registration, I had an unbiased neutral proctor give the students waiver and consent forms. Students were permitted to ask questions prior to consenting, and they were, if they did consent and sign the waivers, then they were sent to a computer lab and filled out a pre-survey where they ranked their oral communication skills, their formal presentation skills, and their professional colleague-to-colleague oral communication skills, choosing from 0 for very poor to 1 needs improvement, 2 neutral, 3 good, or 4 proficient. And this particular experiment was approved by the university's Human Subjects Committee, so similar to other colleges' IRBs. All students in every class, regardless of the study consent, participated in the group assignment and the rubric assessment, as long as they were present on the day that the assignment was given in class. I informed students prior to starting the assignment that their peers would be evaluating them at the conclusion of the assignment. And then the students used my original rubric that I created to critique one another on their oral communication skills. All classes received one of the group assignments and the assessment rubric to prevent adverse treatment of certain students as required by the Human Subjects Committee approval. As such, there can't be a control group comparison, but instead we looked at students completing a self-evaluation survey both before and after the treatment. After the assignment was completed by a group, all members of the group evaluated each other, and students selected 0 points, a half point, or 1 point for each of the different 5 goals that I created, which was the same as one typical homework assignment for the class, totaling at most 5 points. A student earned 0 points if he or she was not successful at meeting their goal, a half point if he or she attempted sometimes but was not always successful, so 0 for did not attempt, a half point for attempted sometimes, and then 1 point for attempted was mostly successful. Once we took all of the peer evaluations, we averaged their scores together to get 1 score total out of 5 points per student. And the grade did help to incentivize students to put forth some effort, but it was still considered low stakes because there were lots of small point assignments throughout the term. And then in the second to last week of class, students were again taken by a proctor to a computer lab and told to fill out the post survey only if they consented at the beginning of the course. And both the pre-survey and post-survey, like I said, filled out the Likert scale describing their oral communication skills. But in the post-survey, there was a few additional questions that also assessed the peer evaluation rubric itself. And just to be clear, I did not gain access to any of the data until after final grades were submitted. The class sections were relatively similar in size, time of day, demographic makeup. A small number of students in 2 of the 3 sections did not consent to participation in the study, leaving me with a total of 40 student observations who consented and were present on the day of the group activities. While undergraduate students are great at a lot of things, they don't right away see communicating with their peers as the same as communicating with colleagues. So we as instructors have to help them get there. To help them see their peers as colleagues and help them differentiate between a collegial interaction that's in a professional atmosphere and a casual friendship. So I created an original rubric to outline the structure of goals for collegial oral communication. And the goals were to actively listen, engage in professional diction and tone, respect others' opinions, clearly and concisely articulate ideas, and maintain a positive attitude. The goals were chosen based on research from SHRM, so Society for Human Resources Management, as well as my own personal teaching experiences. An explanation of each goal accompanied the written goals in the rubric, as you can see on your screen. The 5 goals together create the structure of a professional atmosphere within which all of our students can converse. So I explained the rubric's goals and explanations in class prior to passing out the assignment, and then gave students the opportunity to ask clarifying questions before we actually began. Once you see the results, you'll notice that the peer evaluators were very generous in their critiques. The lowest average score earned in any one category was a 0.8929 for professional diction and tone for section 3. Students performed the best at maintaining a positive attitude. You'll note that the study participants received perfect scores in all sections for this category. However, non-participants saw more variation, suggesting that those who did not consent may be significantly different than those who consented.
Okay, Chelsea, can I ask you to wrap up because we are very close to the end of your time, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. We're closing in. So then the self-evals, we saw improvements from pre-treatment to post-treatment in all of the different categories. They said, yes, they did improve their oral communication skills. They did improve their colleague-to-colleague oral communication skills. They helped them better understand the goals of colleague communication, as well as improved their general oral communication skills. And then the assessment method in particular, they said improved their interactions as well as increased their confidence in their interactions. So in conclusion, the rubric can be adapted and used with any of your group assignments that you already have in your classes. And the field experiment, while limited in size, does tend to indicate that it does improve collegial oral communication skills.